This is Matthew Kratter's Bitcoin University. Today I want to talk about a woke shipcoiner who supports spam on Bitcoin. We're going to be talking about Andreas Antonopoulos, who I think is still probably the greatest Bitcoin educator of all time and was responsible for the orange pilling of so many people, including me. He had a big influence on me through his videos when I was first getting into Bitcoin in 2019. So definitely watch his old videos because they're great. I would say his new videos are not quite as good. This is what we're going to be listening to. A lot of you requested this, so let's jump right in.
Summarize. Any data can be encoded as any data. One person's spam is another person's content. The power to decide what is and what isn't allowed is dangerous because it leads to censorship. It also leads to giving the developers power over the protocol, which will eventually be used by someone else. And if the developers are shown to be able to censor, then they will become required to censor in any and all jurisdictions where they live. And so that's extremely dangerous. And people will be able to put ordinals and shit pegs and JPEGs and NFTs and garbage and Bible verses. I already said garbage, and other stuff on the blockchain, whether we want them to or not. And so I would rather people put it in an op return where we can then disregard it, prune it, and not have to carry it anymore forever, than if they hide it in other places of the protocol because we made op return too hard.
Andreas clearly has not been following this debate very closely, as you can hear there, since he repeats all of Core's talking points that we've been dismantling for many months. For example, the fact that any data can be encoded as any data. The response to that would be, we're not trying to stop deep steganography, but rather large gamified blasts of spam, like inscriptions, for example, that are now responsible for massive UTXO bloat and millions of taproot dust outputs. This is something Andreas fails to mention. When he says one person's spam is another person's content, no, actually, Andreas, spam is just a non-monetary data on what's supposed to be a monetary network. And if we want to play chess, you have no right to burst into the room and try to get us to use the board to play checkers instead. Andreas shows typical pro-core, pro-Bitcoin core linguistic nihilism. You can never really define email spam or postal mail spam or robocall spam, so it must not exist. And I would ask Andreas if he has thus turned off his email filters, because we can't really tell what a spam email is. I would certainly hate to see him censoring his email. This is an example, Andreas really is an example of a typical ivory tower dev who would tell the judge and jury that CSAM on his computer was just ones and zeros because any data can be encoded as any data. This doesn't really tell you that much, in the same way that if we're just saying everyone's made out of atoms, that's not the most useful information when it comes to operating in a society and in a culture. Filtering large blobs of non-monetary data is not censorship. He really conflates the two in that clip. Censorship is when the government tries to silence you or stop your financial transactions. Filtering op returns greater than 40 or 80 bytes is not censorship. This is absurd. Or if it is censorship, then Bitcoin has been censoring since 2014, since the op return wars of 2014. And it's funny then how Andreas has never gone public condemning mempool filters until now, until Bitcoin Core release version 30 in 2025. So filtering, mempool filtering even at the consensus level is clearly not censorship. Keeping mempool filters that have been around since 2014 is also not giving developers the power to censor. This is where consensus comes in. The developers can do nothing that the node runners don't approve of. And the other thing when it comes to Bitcoin spam, relaying and storing large amounts of non-monetary data exposes node runners to a host of unnecessary cultural and legal risks in the many hundreds of jurisdictions around the world where people run Bitcoin nodes. And it's frankly just unnecessary to be relaying and storing this non-monetary data because it does nothing to make Bitcoin better money, while it may open up Bitcoin node runners to unnecessary risks. Relaying unnecessary non-monetary data also imposes unnecessary burdens on your node's CPU and the internet upload resource usage that you have. Now, of course, op returns can be pruned, but then you still need to download this stuff and examine it before discarding it, which could be dangerous if it's CSAM or state secrets or other sensitive or illegal data. We just don't need this large blobs of non-monetary data on Bitcoin. And also, if you are having to examine this stuff before pruning it or while downloading it, this can also make the initial block download, the IBD, take much longer. And then if you do choose to prune the data, you can't run an Electrum server to index and make your wallet more efficient if you want to use a wallet with your node, which is probably the main reason you're running a node, because you want to interact with the Bitcoin network and use your node for your own transactions. Prune nodes, as Andreas recommends, are unfortunately also useless when it comes to bootstrapping new node runners. So just saying you can prune everything is a very, very naive thing, I would say to say. If you're finding this video helpful so far, please help to support the channel. I'll pause really briefly here to ask you to hit the subscribe button. That does really help. Leave a like, leave a comment, question, suggestion for a future video, and share this video with a friend or family member. I wanted to briefly address Andreas's comments about Bible verses as well, because I found them quite offensive. I think it's a wonderful example of the kind of quote-unquote tolerance that's often preached by many on the left. During COVID, Andreas repeatedly condemned people as racist, who asserted that the virus came from China, which is really more just an epidemiological observation than any form of racism. But here he seems to think that it's okay to mock 2.5 billion Christians and a 2,000-year-old tradition that is the foundation of Western culture. And I think it's especially ironic given that the first European churches were founded in Greece by St. Paul, obviously, where Andreas's forebears come from. So he may be reacting to some childhood thing. I'm not really sure. But I would guess that this venom here in this particular video is being directed at Luke Dasher for being Catholic and for putting Bible verses in the Coinbase of transactions many years ago, which is not spam, but is actually necessary for extra entropy. You have to put something in the Coinbase if you're mining, and that gives you some extra entropy. Instead of putting random data, Luke chose to put Bible verses, which I don't think is the greatest sin in the world. And again, this is a very limited space. You can only put something like 95 or 100 bytes there. So it's quite different from large op returns or inscriptions. I would say Andreas betrays a remarkable lack of understanding of Bitcoin cultural history here and the many nuanced distinctions between arbitrary data in the Coinbase, in op returns, and in transaction inputs like inscriptions. If you want to learn more about the distinction, especially how Coinbase transactions work and the amount of arbitrary data that's stored there, I'll put a link to this video in the description notes below. I can't resist too. It's also funny how the guys who are so public about hating the Bible publicly are so often the same guys who post pictures like this. I'm not really sure what's going on here, and I'm sorry to have to share it with you, but I just think it's important context. Also, given Andreas's inability to understand why spam is so bad for Bitcoin, you won't be surprised to learn that, like so many pro-Bitcoin core people and supporters, like Jameson Lopp, for example, Andreas also loves Ethereum. He wrote a book about it in 2018, 2019 called Mastering Ethereum. And I can't tell if these are bees or flies, but I would guess that they're probably flies because Ethereum is obviously a shitcoin. Knut Svanholm has a great post here I wanted to read part of. He said, friendly reminder now that Andreas has commented on the core versus knots debate. This once great educator lost all his credibility in late 2018 when he released Mastering Ethereum. Ethereum is and always has been a 70% pre-mined scam. In July 2016, after the infamous DAO hack, Ethereum demonstrated centralization when it rolled back its blockchain, causing a network split that created a new token, Ethereum Classic, etc., etc. Using fancy buzzwords and code salad tactics, the Ethereum Foundation managed to fool quite a few technical people like Andreas, obviously. And then I thought Knut's comment here was quite good, that anyone endorsing this crap, anyone endorsing Ethereum, was either not understanding how money emerges on the free market, not understanding decentralization and how a blockchain has to make trade-offs to achieve it, or outright in on the scam or paid by the people behind it. I would guess in the case of Andreas, he just got distracted by the cool smart contract functionality and completely chose to ignore the cultural implications of pre-mines and how that ensures that Ethereum can never be good money. So this is a common temptation that we've seen many Bitcoin core devs fall for as well, where they envy smart contract functionality and they want to add a lot of opcodes or a lot of functionality to the Bitcoin base layer and turn it into Ethereum. And this is one of the things we've been fighting. So it's not surprising to see someone who is super pro spam, super anti-filter, anti-fork, that they're also very, very pro Ethereum. This is a common pattern. I think another really weird thing about Andreas is how eager he has been to quote unquote trust the experts in so many areas of his life, as demonstrated in his Twitter feed. During COVID, Andreas repeated one big pharma Fauci talking point after another, and I would say his tweets on this subject have not aged well, especially his comments on the COVID vaccine, which now look hopelessly naive. It really makes you wonder how someone who understood Bitcoin so early on, because Andreas really was early to Bitcoin, and he was lecturing in empty rooms before anyone had even heard of Bitcoin. But it makes you wonder how someone who understood Bitcoin so early on and had these amazing insights could be so naive and compliant when it came to other government talking points. Because if the whole fiat financial system is a scam, which is what you realize when you start to get into Bitcoin, wouldn't that lead you to be a bit more skeptical when it came to big food, big pharma, big war, etc.? You can go through Andreas's X feed here. You can look at COVID, where he talks about COVID denial and how grateful he is to Moderna for the vax, etc., etc. I would say in spite of all this, I'm still grateful for Andreas's past contributions to Bitcoin education. Some of his past videos really are good, so I would again encourage you to check them out. Just be really careful listening to anything that he has to say today. He seems quite out of touch and just repeating the talking points of Bitcoin Core like so many people do, rather than verifying they choose to trust. I want to wish all of you a happy Thanksgiving, a great Thanksgiving tomorrow. I'll probably be taking the day off. I'm very grateful actually for all of you as well. And I want to take this time as well to say thank you, Satoshi. So hopefully see all you guys in my next video on Friday. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the subscribe and like buttons. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I publish my next video. And let me know your questions and comments in the comment section below. Thanks all for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.